Hey, hello, Jaakko. It's good to see you again. I always enjoy our conversations. For those that don't know me, John Connors. I spent 40 years in a corporate environment, living in the States. Retired not that long ago from a very senior executive position in a Fortune 250 company. And I traded in that very high senior level position to now I take care of horses on the farm, take my son to soccer, and write a lot on LinkedIn, and have a lot of good conversations with some very cool folks like Yako. And looking forward to our discussion today. We always have a good time, Yako.
Hi, John. Good to have you back. John was already once in my podcast, and my name is Jaakko Pispala. I build personal brands mostly on LinkedIn, and my specialty on that is authenticity. I want people to look and sound who they really are. And I'm doing it as an entrepreneur, doing it for 3 years now. Yeah, I think pretty much 3 years. And like like John said, I'm also having interesting conversation on LinkedIn with John and with many other people. And today we're going to talk about the differences of Fortune 500 companies, how it's work in a big corporate, and how does it look like for entrepreneur. What is similar and what are the differences in your everyday work. But before we dive into that, there was something super interesting that John mentioned. And I didn't get the answer to this question, but I will ask it so that you will also hear. So, John, you said that you have two things to do today after the recording. So, what are those?
I only have two jobs today. One is I have to go clean out the barn for the horses to make sure it's ready for them to come in. So literally shoveling shit. And then after that, I have to work on my TED Talk. I'm gearing up to do a TED
Mm.
Talk later this summer. I think your question was which is the fun and which is the work. I think they're both
Yes.
fun. I'm going to enjoy both, and that's a beautiful thing about being retired is I can only do the stuff I enjoy, and choose not to do the rest.
But that's it, because it's like for me, it sounds like fun. I would totally get there side by side with you and shovel the shit or practice your TED talk. It's something that like
Yeah, and the reality is, most likely when I'm in the barn, I'll probably come up with some ideas for the talk. So it's a little intertwined.
yeah, it's a good space for your brain to work a little bit, get some distance from the papers, and like really process what you're working on.
Mm.
Then it's perfect. But all right, that was good to know. Interesting plans. Interesting plans for the day. So now let's dive into the topic that we don't know how we're gonna talk about it yet. We have
Right.
a loose frame, but we were talking that people start by thinking what fits who. So, what do you think, in your point of view, what kind of person fits well to the corporate world?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple of different levels of corporate. There is my most recent experience, which is the big Fortune 250, Fortune 500, large international companies that have a lot of structure and process around them, but also bring a lot of specialization that in those big companies, you become an expert in one thing. Your job becomes one thing, and you become really, really good at that and focused on that and just optimize the heck out of it. Depending on the role, though, you'll be closer or farther away from the actual action of the business. Finance, IT, HR, things like that. Those are necessary functions. You have to be good at them, but you can do them in any company. You're not. It doesn't matter whether you're making chocolate or hydraulics or medical devices. That work is about the same. The closer you get to manufacturing, it's different. Engineering is different, and of course, sales and customer service is different, where you actually get to engage with the customer. So, you can kind of really pick a niche and stick to it. The risk is you get funneled into that niche, and then you don't see the broader picture about how things work. If you're in IT, you know exactly how all the computers work. In a big company, maybe only how some of the computers work. You may have no idea what customer service is. You may not even be able to name the top three customers of the company, let alone where the money comes from to get your paycheck. And in a large company, for a lot of extents, you're playing with other people's money. And so there's a distance. There's not as much. personal ownership of what's going on. You can leave the building at the end of the day and you can forget about it. Now, a lot of folks stay engaged in their careers and they think about things at home and take work home. I mean, I understand all that. I was guilty of that. But you can disconnect if you want. You can work 5 days a week, 40, 50 hours a week, whatever it is. And I think um, the other thing is you're not building something for yourself. Yeah, you might be building a career, which is deepening your specialties and continuing to advance to as far as you want to advance, but you're not building an asset necessarily. You're not building something that reflects who you are. And the other thing is you have to be comfortable engaging with people because rarely in a large company can one person make one decision. I mean, typically even the CEOs can't make a decision. They have to consult with
Yeah.
their direct reports and consult with their boards. In a big company, you have to be able to work with other people and articulate a point of view about where you want to go and be able to swallow hard if you don't like the answer and do it anyways. That's not to break the law or anything like that, but because you can't make all the decisions. And the other thing is you have to have a certain level of patience because the larger the company, the more complex the issues are, the longer the decision making cycle. And so I think you need to be someone that wants to be good at what you do or, really focused on a certain area, if you will. Um, and so I think that's a lot of the main differences is you have to be comfortable in that environment. And some people are. Look, there's the old phrase, do you work to live or live to work? And I think if you want to be in a corporation, you might it's hard to say which side of the equation you would fall on now that I think about it. But you're going to probably be working less and it's easier to not get yourself wrapped up in your job. I say easier because there's still a risk, but
Hmm.
we can maybe come back to that one. But yeah, I think you need to be someone where you don't working for a big company, you don't really take personal ownership of the customers and the products.
Yeah, right. That's if I compare, for example, my day today, uh, I started with some HR work because I had a me on me conversation in the morning. What are my plans for today? What I need to achieve today? So then I did um, some client work. So I did some production work. Then I handled some client communication. I did a little bit of sales. Then I did a lot of marketing. So like so far I've been wearing 5 hats in in one day. And I think that the main thing, at least for me, like the absolutely best part working as an entrepreneur is that it doesn't matter if it rains or shines, it's always in my hands. Like I'm responsible, but at the same time, I have everything that I need to change the situation. So in both in good and bad, it's like I like to I like to know who to blame or who to thank when, when depending on the situation.
So curious, in a big company, when I was working there was always someone to help, right? If something was wrong with my PC, I would call the help desk and someone would come and sort it out for me. On my own, I had to figure out all that stuff on my own. Um, or if there was a complex issue, I had colleagues I could call and that would have expertise and we could rely on it. You as a solopreneur, you're everything, right? And yes, you can make a decision quick, but you don't always have someone to reach out to. How do you find, you know, how do you find making the decisions, particularly in areas where maybe you need an expert, but you don't know, but you still have to make a decision? You don't have that support network really. It's you.
I think uh, the main thing that I want to take care of, make sure, is that I don't get into the complex situations. I have 2 services which are well structured, so I don't I don't have a big machinery. I don't have a big production, so the problems should be simple. Like of course sometimes they can feel difficult even though like everything is is simple, but like I don't think that I have I have annoying problems, but I don't have complex problems.
Okay. So the size of the business and the scope of the services you're offering is manageable so that you can sort of become an expert all around.
Yeah, yeah. In a way that I remember when I started, I had more things to offer, and it was more difficult because then I needed to handle several things. I needed to be some s- some expertise, some level of expertise in various different things, and that
Mhm.
was difficult. Even though I've been always using freelancers to help me, but still working with freelancers, I can never outsource the responsibility. So I need to know what I want to achieve, what is doable, how to hire someone. So I think it has helped a lot that my focus is getting all the time. It's like a more more niche and more niche. So it helps me that the problems stay less complex. And of course, when the service packet is a part of the smaller, it's also that limits to the type of problems that I'm having. So I think the simplicity is the key for running running a business as a solopreneur.
Yeah, and I guess that the pressure is different too, right? So in a big company, the company I work for, $20 billion in sales, that ship doesn't stop quickly. If you lose
Yeah,
one customer, you feel it right away, right? Your trips to
yeah,
the grocery store change for the family change right away.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that I'm wondering if that brings a different level of pressure because of the ownership, you know, um, and assuming you're not independently wealthy and just doing this for fun, right? That you count on that income. It's how is that pressure maybe different? Because I know you also worked at some point as an employee, right, where you were getting a paycheck, and so that was different for you.
That's I never thought about it before, but now that you asked, I like immediately got this picture in my head. Like there's two sides of the coin. In one way, yes, each client is super important because, yes, like you said, it's my paycheck, it's the groceries and everything that we need to buy. But then again, if someone if someone really like pushes me to the edge, I can say, okay, I'll let this one go. Like so, and I don't get the shit about it. It's my decision. I calculate, okay, this how much money I'm gonna lose, what I'm gonna gain in its place. Okay, I have maybe mental clarity. I have more time, whatever. But when I was working for someone, I couldn't just say, okay, I don't want to work with you anymore. Bye bye.
Mhm.
No, I always had to like, even if the client was wrong, let's say like in a harsh way, that the client was wrong and was really pushing in it. When I was working for someone, I still needed to handle the situation, even if the client wanted to be difficult. But
Mhm.
now in the early days, I had few, and maybe I don't know if a difficult client is the right word, but some not so suitable clients, and I had the courage to say that okay, it's okay, we don't have to work together. Like let's let's stop here. Okay, this is what we have done. We agreed to that you pay this and this, and we are even. And all right, no harm, no hard feelings. And so it was very important for me to know with whom I I should work and with whom not. And that is a choice that I can't have when I'm in the company. So
Yeah,
yes,
and I think you kind of highlight another point there that while you may rely on a small number of clients, um, almost each client is its own revenue stream and its own paycheck. Whereas if you're an employee, you have one paycheck, and so you rely on that so much more. If you lose one or two clients, not that that hope not to happen, but if you do, you've got other clients, right? And it might hurt for a while,
yes,
but your income doesn't go to zero right away. Whereas if you're an employee and you lose that paycheck, it's gone right away. And it's so there is to some extent more risk. And also I think to your point with your clients, what you said here and other stories you've told me, you both kind of know it's coming. So there's some prep time. And as an employee, sometimes if maybe the company's about to make a decision to let you go. but not always. Legally, there's no obligation, at least in the U.S., to give any notice on something like that. And yeah, it's what do they say? Putting all your eggs in one basket. Being an employee, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. You're spreading them out over multiple clients. So it's somewhat lower risk and trade for more ownership, personal investment. Is that maybe a way to think about it?
No, absolutely. I would say I would agree with that one. I used to think the opposite. I was raised to think that okay, a steady job is the goal in life, like to work someone and have the same job for a long period of time. But now that I used to believe that there was such things that steady paycheck. Then I learned that there isn't actually that like it can all change in few days, like you mentioned, without notice. Of course, there's always signs, not always, but usually there are some signs. But still, it can in a way come like lightning from the sky that is just boom, and now you don't have the paycheck anymore. Also, when you're entrepreneur, if you're being a jackass and you piss off one client, you will lose one client. But if you're working, you might lose your whole income. So,
Yeah.
in a way, it's
I think I think
it's
is
true.
there's another thing that I think in some respects is maybe a little. You're doing this, so you're going to tell me if I'm up a creek and talking noise here. Um, is I think there's sort of three intelligences. There's IQ that we all know about, just the raw intelligence. There's EQ, emotional intelligence. How do we relate to other people? And there's a third that various names, but I call it organizational intelligence or OQ. And that's the understanding of how things really work, how organizations work. It's not always the CEO calling the shots. It might actually be that third level manager in a foreign country that's actually calling the shots for whatever you're working on. And understanding how that works and understanding if I do A, how it leads to B, C, and D. And I think to be successful in a large company, you need to have master all three intelligences. And so your brain's now having to split its time across the three. My hypothesis is that as a solopreneur, you need the first two. And because you don't need the third, your brain can spend more time on the raw brain power and the emotional component to make sure you're better connected with your clients and the work. And again, it's not that the brain capacity is any different. It's what the brain has to spend its time figuring out and thinking about. And let's face it, there's only so many hours in a day. We do like to sleep and take vacations from time to time. So what do you do with that, precious amount of brain time that you've got? And so I wonder if that having to master more intelligences, more things going on in the head in a corporation somehow makes the experience and different than this. I mastered that and how to work the organization. The understanding, not always how to push the buttons right, but I understood who was the ones that made the shots, and I had to spend a lot of time thinking about that, which was much more consumed a lot of time versus what's the right way to do this project? What's the right way to negotiate this deal? How do I influence this person? I had to first ask the question, who did I have to influence? And then how do I influence them, right? Whereas a solopreneur is kind of like, well, how do I influence this person? And again, maybe I'm completely thinking wrong about this. How does that strike you?
No, I think you're spot on with this one because I don't really have to think about the organization charts or anything like that. Like it's much more straightforward. Like I'm dealing with my clients and they are always the decision makers. So like it's two decision makers are talking. So if you decide something, it will happen. We don't have to run it by someone else. Or if someone is selling me their services, they have to just talk with me. If I'm happy about it, I buy. And it's like it is. It comes a little bit down to that, like uh, the good. Who is the responsible one in good and bad? Like
Mm,
it saves a lot of time when you don't have to look for responsible ones, or also you don't have the choice to look the responsible ones, but you have to
Yeah.
have to take. So in both ways, it saves a lot of time and energy when you know that okay, it's in my hands. So I absolutely agree with you. And how do I spend that energy that's left over? I think it goes into several things that I didn't know about being entrepreneur before I started. Like for example, here in Finland, probably everywhere, but accounting. Even though I have a accountant, I still need to spend way more hours than I thought with receipts and everything. Uh, I need to understand about the basics of the taxes and like all that takes takes some time. And then I would say that most of my time is divided with client work and my own marketing, service development, which are all related also. Like when I find out something interesting in my own marketing, I can take it to my clients.
Mhm.
And when I learn something with my clients, I can take it to myself.
There you
And
go.
so it's like like I have taken many of your ideas as well. So
It
so
all
in a way,
works. It's all tightly coupled. Yeah.
yeah, but it is more simple, and I I like it that way. I don't know how it's going to be when I'm going to scale, because of course I want to make the company grow. And I don't know, maybe I'm not the right person when I'm starting to scale. Maybe I need to have someone who has the organizational mind also, who understand the organizations and the structure and who you should influence, really. Maybe that's something that I should think about when I'm growing.
So I think bring up an interesting topic there. So, if to boil it down to some of the basics, as an employee, you get a paycheck. Maybe you get bonuses. Maybe you get some stock equity, things like that. But it's um, in some respects, you are even though people might get a salary, but you're essentially working hourly, right? You're earning a wage, if you will, even if it is a fixed amount. In your case, you have the ability. So yes, you are kind of doing that, right? You are kind of working on the hour. Some of your stuff is direct billing. Some of it is a package price. But to your point, you have the ability to actually build a business, which is an asset, a thing that has a life separate from you that you can sell on later. As an employee, you don't have the opportunity to build something to sell from that employment relationship. You are an hourly worker. You have that chance to build something. Um, and create value and family wealth beyond just the latest client that you've landed.
Yeah, that's interesting because I understood it quite. Actually, I understood it already before I became entrepreneur, that I need to focus on the result, not on the hours. But since I've been working so long based on hours, was it maybe it was a paid per hour or monthly paycheck? Anyway, it was always connected to time, and it could be that I was surfing the internet all day, but I got paid the same time the day that I worked like without any breaks. And now when I became an entrepreneur, I understood it, but I still sometimes suffer that I need to focus on the results, not just like nobody gives a shit how many hours I work. My family does, but not in a good way.
Yeah, right, right.
Like so, I need to I need to be very strict. I need to say a lot of no, and usually it's to myself. Like having, oh, it would be nice to take the business that way. Like no, focus here, do
Mm.
this, and that's the way that I believe that what I have studied, at least, is that when you focus, when you maintain your focus, you can really create something bigger, like you said, and build wealth. But if you
Yeah,
wanna serve everyone, you will just end up burning out, and hours are just piling up. So the
right. Yeah, so it's
so the focus is extremely
yeah,
important.
You need clients that aren't just buying time from Jaakko, that they're buying Jaakko's product or service that John could deliver too
Yeah.
if it was built up the right way, right?
Yes.
Um, and you have that opportunity. Not easy, right? Because you got to keep paying the bills while you're building the product or service. But that, to your point, that's how you build a business and scale is doing that. You bring up another interesting point. Is I know in a lot of comments on LinkedIn, and I've written my own fair share of them about the boss employee relationship and how it is so hard to get it right, to be positive, productive. And when you get it right, it's fantastic. And I've had bosses where I've had phenomenal relationships with. I've also had one or two that weren't the greatest. Um, whether it was a good or bad relationship, at least there's someone there giving you coaching and guidance and steering. Whether you agree with it or not, you have in the employer-employee relationship, you have a built-in coach, manager. For you, you don't have that built in. You have to go seek it, right? And it might be from your wife, it might be from friends, it might be, I know I know a lot of coaches that have coaches, right? Just to sort of do that, just like a lot of psychologists have a psychologist to go talk to. Um, but you have to go seek that out. And it
I,
becomes a thing. Whereas in the employer-employee relationship, you get feedback on a regular basis, like it or not, but that can be a real benefit to being that employee. If assuming that's the kind
absolutely.
of feedback that makes you better. And of course, then there's the argument about someone that's a positive leader creates one thing. Then there's the argument that a bad leader teaches you how not to do things as long as you don't stay too long. So yeah, it's the whole reframing thing. But for you, it's a little bit different because you used to be an employee, you had someone guiding you on a daily basis, and now you're figuring it out on your own. So you also had to go find people to coach you.
Yes. Yes, I did. And it's true. And in theory, I believe even if you have a bad boss who doesn't know how to give you instructions, you can still learn if you can just manage to put aside all the bad behavior and take the important things. I know it's like almost impossible, but in theory, you still have someone that is like reflecting what you're doing. And then you can either accept it, take it, or you don't. But yeah, when now as a solopreneur, I don't have that. I have a lot of friends, but even if they're entrepreneurs, they're not necessarily in the same field, in the same situation. So in a way, they can help, but still, no one, no one understands my business so deeply that they could really like give a business advice. And then, of course, there is nowadays I could uh, ask from ChatGPT, but I have learned that that usually just takes a huge amount of time, and we end up arguing anyway. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so, so it's something that like I have a business coach, Oscar, and I'm very happy. I've been working with him, I think, more than 2 years now. I'm very happy with him, and even with business coach, I need to understand a little bit of like where I need help. Because if I don't have any clue, it's uh, it's
Mm,
very difficult for him to like go through all the all the hay in the barn and to find that
yeah,
the
yeah.
one that we need.
It's like
So
what we were talking about before the camera started, about different ways of thinking and addressing problems, where some people you can ask a broad question, what Jaakko, what's your problem today? Right. Well, that's a broad problem, and some people can answer that. Some people, it creates three levels of cognitive dissonance and they freeze up. They can't answer the broad question. And those folks maybe need something more concrete. Jaakko, how's your customer service doing today? Jaakko, how was your last call? How's your, have you landed any new clients? Then that's something specific you can respond to. Um, and it's part of, like you said, with the coach, as a solopreneur, you may not know what to ask of your coach, and they need to kind of figure out, well, how do I pull that out to provide some value? In the employer-employee relationship, your boss generally has a pretty good idea of your strengths and weaknesses and will offer coaching and help, needed or not.
yeah, yeah, and it's like, well, actually, I can if I make an example. I could focus on my website. Like, okay, now if my business coach would be and I would understand, well, he does something, understand some level of marketing, but okay, we need to fix my website. There's something wrong with my website. And then we spend 3 months and nothing happens. Then oh, but there's no one coming to the website. So we can focus on we can find a problem and focus on it. But even if we solve that problem, it doesn't change anything because there is another bottleneck that is more urgent to solve. So like that's the challenge, because if I just take a random business coach and starts to interview me, we're going to find hundreds of problems, no doubt. But to know in which one we need to focus. So I think that's like when you find that kind of connection, that with the business coach or with a other entrepreneur or friend, that you really find the problems and you find the ones that are the current bottlenecks. So
Hmm.
then you're like, then you have something very specific. And I think that's often the big challenge, like which problem I should solve.
Yeah, and sometimes that requires a long-term relationship. I know when I do some business coaching, um, if the client comes in with a very specific question, then we can focus on that very specific question. If a client just has some broad, hey, my business isn't doing well, okay, let's start by looking at your financial statements, because financial statements can tell an awful lot, particularly in small businesses. Um, and so that becomes, where do you start to get to it? And again, different ways of looking at things. So okay.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think there is a maybe that's something that is easier if you're in a big corporation, like in a big company, because you have your job. You focus on that one. You only need to solve the problems that are related to your expertise. You don't have to, at least not day to day, you don't have to worry about what happens before or what happens after. It's someone else who's looking from outside who needs to take care of, like, that the chain is working, that everyone is on their place doing the right thing. So in
What's
a way,
been
it's
as you made the transition um, to be a solopreneur, what were some of the biggest surprises that you encountered?
hmm, I think it's the admin work. That's one of them. Like how, and I don't know if it's how much it is, but like when it comes on top of everything, you plan your day like full, always, always too full. It's my specialty. Always have too many tasks per day, and then comes some ad hoc or some admin work that you didn't expect. Like, because usually when you're working for someone, you still get the ad hoc, but it's like limited to this certain topic,
Hmm.
this certain area, and as a solopreneur, it can be almost anything. And of course, having small kids like in school age, so it's also another story that it might be that okay, the whole day went by doing something else, and then you realize this it's 5 p.m. and you still have tons of work to do.
Yeah.
So it's like the time management is, because especially when working from home office, like I don't go to the work, so it's always
Mm.
mixed the time that okay, oh, the boys are going to school. I'm gonna help them with breakfast. I'm gonna send them to school. Oh, now they're coming home, so I'm gonna take a break here. So like the time management, I think that's something with the extra ad hoc and admin tasks. I think that's something that
Yeah, not only
surprised.
what I'm thinking about is not only for you, but for your family, because let's say your relaxation moment and place in the house is right where you're sitting right now. Well, if you're sitting there, they don't know if you're working and it
They
should be
don't.
left alone, or if, hey, yeah, dad, can we go kick a ball around or something? They can't tell the difference. and it's, somewhat when people are working from home, you get that, but, um, you know, one benefit of going in the office is there is a visual cue. I am in a place of work. Let me do my work, right? And also your family's not there, so you're not mixing it.
Yeah.
Whereas, where you're at, and I know sometimes you like to go to local cafes to work to physically get out, or
Mhm.
and it puts you in a whole different spot where people have no idea who you are, and you're there to work. So
Yeah, no one is going to ask anything. Maybe, you wanna refill? It's like the most difficult
yeah,
question I have to answer
right,
the
right,
whole time.
yeah,
But it's all, again, like, has two sides. Working at home is nice because when you have a break, you can go and play with your kids. You can have lunch together with the family. But then again, it's very difficult, like, when your kids know that you are at home and they will tell you something. And I wanna hear. I want them to be able to tell me, but at the same time, I have the pressure that I need to focus on this task. So it puts in like a we haven't find the perfect solution yet, like how to address that one. Maybe the next house when we're gonna have one room more, when I'm gonna have a real office room,
yeah,
maybe I will put the sign on the door like only only emergency, and then then we
yeah,
see what is
yeah.
emergency.
A lot of people do that. If you can't close a door, put a little red green flag on the desk so that people
Yeah,
can see I'm open or I'm not open. Yeah, and people
yeah.
do that in the offices sometimes too, about I'm open or I'm not open, right? But yeah,
When
it's
but it has to have like two options. If it's something very bad or something super good, both
yep,
are like exceptions that you can come in. Like only if it's somewhere in the middle, then wait. But if it's like if you're super excited about something, then always come in. Or if something is really troubling you, then of course come in.
thinking about people, and one of the questions we had kicked around is where do ideas come from, and how do you solve problems? And I think as an employee, you tend to deal with the same people every day. I know in my last job, there was about 10 people that I dealt with on a regular
Yeah.
basis for the core set of things that we dealt with. So I always knew who to go to. And I worked with these folks for 5 years. So we knew each other really well, which on one hand was great because we built up a trust and a shorthand for talking to each other. And we got very efficient at solving very complex problems because we knew each other. The flip side is the risk of that is if there's any friction, what's the saying? Familiarity breeds contempt, and sometimes it gets
Hmm.
hard to do that. So, so it's good and bad for you. It's almost like there's a constant flow of new people coming in,
Hmm.
right? That you can go to,
Yes.
and to some extent, it's always fresh and new, but that's always not a good thing. Always fresh and new. So from that perspective, is it, how working with the same people on the same issues every day has value for efficiency, but maybe doesn't get as much creativity. Whereas, in your space, do you feel yourself more creative because you're dealing with different people?
Yes, I have to be more creative, but there is like, for example, in the last job, there was a guy who knew everything about the analytics. It was so easy. Whatever my client was, whatever was their question, I like, I had to, I had to write a half sentence, and the guy was like, "Yeah, okay, that's how you do it." Like, and now, now when okay, I still have a freelancers and who are helping me, but because they are sometimes changing, it's not so it's not so easy to get the answers. Well, so, but with that guy, remember we had a good connection, like in of also outside of work. So we kind of our brains were in a way wired a bit similar way. So it was I didn't have to explain a lot to
Hmm.
get the answer. And now even if I have a guy with a similar expertise, if our brains are wired differently, he doesn't understand what I'm asking. So I have to explain much more in detail. So in a way, I need to be more creative, but it definitely sometimes it takes a lot more time. But then what I gain in return is that I always learn something new. I always have like, okay, so I've been doing it like this, but oh, John said that why don't you do it like that? And damn, it's much faster like this. So it's again, but something that I that I feel that is the personal connection. Like that's something that always, if you have that connection, the communication is so easy. Like, and you get things done so much faster. And if there's not a strong connection, I feel there is always a little bit extra explaining or something like that involved.
Yeah, that strong connection building trust, which also is helpful if something doesn't go quite the right way. You don't jump to conclusions. You just say, I know that, somebody had a bad day, or oops, they goofed on that one, or whatever. You can be more forgiving and trust. Or if they say something controversial, you might, all right, because I used to have this, I would ask people and they would tell me something, I don't think that's the right thing, but I trust this person, so I'm going to follow their lead on that. And it paid off when I did that. But if you don't know the person, you don't have the trust, their advice may be exactly right. You're not quite sure because it's maybe so different from what you expected.
Yeah, it is, and it is, and then it's like without connection, it's more difficult to trust with the answers. Like you feel more that you're hoping it to be correct, but when you have that connection, you're like, yeah, he knows what he's doing. Like that's that's how it is to trust.
Mhm. Now, when you, so you took some great holidays over the winter heading up to the Arctic Circle, did you find that it was easy or hard to either disconnect or dial down your engagement with others during that time? Did you disconnect? Fine.
I did. I think I worked. No, I didn't work every day, and the days that I worked, I think there was like a couple of hours, maybe maximum 3 hours. What is I think impossible, at least so far, is that to like disconnect completely because the brain is working all the time. And when I go somewhere else and I disconnect, it's when the brain starts to see other opportunities, other options, other ways to do things, comes ideas. So I always need to have pen and paper with me. Uh, Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh man, I need to write it down. And that's something that never happened when I was working for someone else. Like I slept like a log. I don't know if it's a saying in
Mhm.
English, but but like you couldn't wake me up. But now sometimes it's like I wake up, man, what a brilliant idea, and I write it down. And in the morning, sometimes I still agree. Sometimes like, oh, I should have just slept.
So to some extent, that probably not much of a difference between being an employee in a big company and a solopreneur. That in certain jobs, the mind is always going, right? Now, if you're an accounts payable clerk, the world needs those. They may not be worried about the bills when they go home or on vacation, but an executive is probably always on. I always used to call, taking a vacation, sort of when you got back, it was the punishment when you returned. Uh, the,
Yeah. But, but what about you? What are the things that you are going to take with you on your next steps? Like you have a long career in a corporation world, in a big companies. What are the things that you're going to take with you for the next step?
so it's fascinating. The things that I did and did well were leading large global system implementation and transformation projects. I mean, projects that would span thousands of people, multiple countries. And then also, I was, for the last few years, the main negotiator of IT contracts for this company. And, that was, small contracts from 4 figures up to 8 figure contracts, and from small vendors to, the big tech companies. And so that was a definite skill set, and it took a lot of energy. And I think I was, pretty good at it. But the reality is now that where I'm at, Um, the courses don't care. Um, my son doesn't care. My son's curious about what I used to do, but for the most part, it's just doesn't care. What I'm taking forward, I think, is one benefit of being in a big business. If you're paying attention and you get the right experiences, you can get a doctorate in how businesses work. I think the company I worked for had sort of an overall business system that they called the win strategy. And it was kind of what are the most important elements of a business and how does it flow together? And that permeated the entire organization. And there were some common themes that I heard over and over and over again and explored ideas and just curious how business worked. That what I'm taking away is a deep, deep understanding of how businesses operate. That OQ we talked about earlier, how things happen, why they happen, so that when I'm looking at a situation or helping other entrepreneurs and they say, "Well, this is happening," I'm able to see, well, that actually means these things over here. If this person says this, it really probably means that. And being able to see those connections, see around corners, that's a great experience I got because I paid attention. I know a lot of people that spend their entire careers and really don't understand what their companies did and how they made money. But if you pay attention to it, you can do that. So I'm using that now to help other small entrepreneurs if they've got questions about should I do this or should I do that. Okay, let's talk about it. That's what this means. That's what that means. Here's opportunities to go after this or stay away from that. So that's probably the biggest thing. And then a lot of my writings on LinkedIn and the books that I'm working on is about observations about what has made me successful, but also comfortable with myself. A lot of times people in business are so focused on, there's a phrase that I love, and it's focused on keeping the job and not doing the job. And when people are focused on keeping the job, they're not always doing their best work. And so being able to see that and coach people through that to the point where they can do their job. Um, I had a great experience over the weekend with a friend of mine he's in his mid 50s and he is just an absolute brilliant contractor when it comes to building houses and commercial buildings and building them, maintaining them, all of that. He also happens to be a very successful chef on the side, and he's drifted around the world and he's done a lot of this. But he's getting to the point. He's like, I've done this so often. There's no construction task that I don't know how to do and do it well. Life feels sort of empty for him at the moment. So we started talking about, okay, well, what do you do with that? If you walk into a house, what's the job that attracts you most that you want to go do? And it turns out that he really likes to do tile work. Okay. And he's done a couple of odd jobs doing tile here and there. And I'm like, well, okay. He's like, but yeah, physically doing it. No, by the way, I'm getting paid by the hour to do this stuff. So it's not really satisfying. And I said, okay, what if you start teaching people how to do tiling, right? Give classes in person, give classes online. Like, yeah, I could do that. I said, yeah, so you could host a class. It doesn't cost you much of anything to do it. Oh, by the way, you might pick up some other clients along the way by hosting a class. And then I'm like, well, that's great that you do that, but you're still selling yourself by the hour. What if you actually, once you got that up and running, created your own line of tiles, designs, and using your classes as a way to get people interested in your designs? Now you've created a business to go and sell. Reason for telling that story is I think there's someone who was looking at himself as not feeling very good, but having this immense pocket of skills that are just, and he's done work for me, so I know how good the quality of the work is. Um, but he didn't quite know what to do with it. So I sort of took that business experience of looking at this and saying, okay, let's look at what you're good at, what you really enjoy doing, and how do we spin that into a business where you can create an asset for yourself that you could sell down the road and do a nice little retirement nest eggs. That's a prime example of where I paid attention to the business and how things work and how I'm now applying that to help small business folks.
That's interesting because the the two things that you mentioned are kind of also like I think for many entrepreneurs they're the biggest problems. Like the first one is exactly finding the bottlenecks that I don't see or the entrepreneur doesn't see. But because you have the wide scale understanding of business, you can find the bottlenecks like, okay, actually here where you're stuck, like here's the business stuck here. And then doing your job instead of keeping it is an excellent example of how you can improve your service as an entrepreneur. You might get a complaint from client like, yeah, I don't like this. Okay, you have two choices. You think, okay, the client is an idiot, or what can I learn from here? What can I learn from here so I can do my job better? And I think those are the two, if not the most important things, but one of the most important things for entrepreneurs is to know where are your bottlenecks and how you can improve what you're doing. So it's funny that you you learned them from the corporation world. Well,
Yeah.
yet again, business is still a business, even if it's a one-person business.
Hmm. Yeah. There's
But
some
that's
similarities. Yeah. I think, one of the things that you and I talked about in a previous discussion was uh, there is a need for solopreneurs and there's a need for Fortune 500 businesses because they actually serve different customers. You mentioned earlier in this chat, when you're talking to a client, you're usually talking to the principal, the decision maker, right? And they're typically going to want to talk to the decision maker. And your customers, your clients are going to want to make sure they're big enough to you that when they call, you pick up the phone, right? But the flip side is if someone from, say, Caterpillar called and is looking for social media help, they're not going to want to talk to Jaakko because you're one person. They want a 50-person social media shop, right?
yeah,
And so it's different. But the other thing is, and so big companies have to work with big companies because of the scale and the regulations and the rules and the contract details that go into those big things. So things move slower. There are bigger dollar amounts involved. There's more people involved. Um, but similarly, a big company doesn't necessarily want to work with a small solopreneur, right? Because the revenue that's, say, hugely important to a solopreneur, to a Fortune 500 company, is revenue that's not important and maybe actually costs them because of all the overhead. The difference, the overhead being what it needs to serve large, complicated, highly regulated businesses. You don't have that. Your overhead is, a couple of monthly bills that you have to pay, right? And it's, both are needed in the
yeah,
world. It's not one's right and what's wrong, but they're just
exactly,
different.
exactly. And I think that's the interesting thing. And I think like I like to, I don't know how to say this that it doesn't come out wrong. In a way, if we think like being entrepreneur on a certain level that you grow and you get to the next step, next level. I always like to buy services from little below, like one level below myself, just to know that I am the important client for them, and also I might I might bring them some challenges that they haven't had before, which is something that I'm happy to talk with them. Like always try to create a kind of relationship that if I can help in some way, I want to be available for them. That it's not just like a business relationship, but if there's something that I can help, I'm more than happy to help, like with my experience in a way. So, and then often I have clients who are like a little bit above my level, I try to learn as much as possible. Like sometimes I try to slip in some questions that are not exactly about
Yeah.
me, so, but to learn a little bit more about them and how they made it. And sometimes I just say like, okay, I think I admire your work. Like, how did you get in that position? What did you do? What were the most important things that you figured out? And it's like that's also that's also a good reason why I like to work with entrepreneurs, because we are often happy to share our knowledge to pass it forward.
You're triggering your thought, Yako, as you mentioned that, and I'm going to overgeneralize, and I might say this wrong, and maybe some of our the folks listening to this will correct me. Um, but it almost feels like a solopreneur needs to have more curiosity than an employee does,
Yes.
because like you just said, there's always something to be learned, and constantly paying attention to the customers, what they need, something new about business or a market or something. And as an employee, you often are kind of told what to go do, different job by job. But it feels like an entrepreneur almost needs more curiosity just as a base skill.
But I think it often comes naturally, uh, especially if you're like a purpose-led entrepreneur, that you have a mission, what you're
Hmm.
doing. So you're curious, you want to get better. Like when I think about my history when I was working paid per hour, like there was a company I was working with the metal, I don't know, metal shop, or how do you call it? And we had like two halls and one supervisor. And when I saw from the window the supervisor was coming to the hall where I was, I went to the other one so that I could be just like not doing anything. I could like avoid working. Just okay, the boss is coming here, so I'm gonna take the other exit. I'm gonna go to the other hall that he doesn't see that
There you
I'm
go.
not working today. So, and now like if I see something that I'm super tired and I see something interesting, okay, I need to understand this one before I go to sleep.
Mm, yeah.
So it's a it's a different mindset when you're building to yourself, and also like when you're passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah, you can't hide from yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's also sometimes when I have the task that I don't like to do, and I manage to talk myself out of it, that I don't do it. But then I put the post-it note on the fridge door, like saying, "Okay, Dad has to do this today. Ask him." So, so like then then there's no way to run. Like
That's
there's
it.
I can't hide anymore. That's like
Oh, that's fantastic.
the
That's
ultimate
fantastic.
trick to eat the frog.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, awesome. All right. So I'm just kind of looking through the list that we've gotten, and we've covered an awful lot of what we said we wanted to cover here.
Yeah, I didn't even check it after we
Yeah.
started talking, but I think I think we have covered a lot of things. Oh, there's plenty to talk, but I don't know if there's something. Do you have something specific in your mind that you wanna still add today?
Yeah, I guess the only thing, sort of some general advice, is for everybody. I think there should be your main source of income, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur. I think everybody should have a side hustle, as it's sometimes called. Now, a side hustle as an employee could be, a side job that you do, a service, a small, product you sell on the web or whatever. For a solopreneur, it might be an organization you volunteer with, something that you do. Maybe you get heavily involved, for folks that are involved in churches, heavily involved in your church, but something that gives your mind purpose and something to do different from the work. And I think it's really important for a solopreneur. It's so easy to spend, like you said, 24/7 focused on one thing, but having time with family and having time maybe with something else, because interesting thing happen to bring you're not working on something, hey, you're actually working on it.
Yes.
And I think a lot of employees have work and family, right? And I think there's room for something else. But the cool thing about being an employee is starting a side hustle, if you will, allows you to dip your toe into it to see, do you like it? you know,
Yeah.
Setting up a website, setting up a product, or, recording some online classes or something, but something that has some other, um, you know, purpose outside of the day job, I think is important. And the other thing is that if you want to go from an employee to a solopreneur, it creates a bit of a safe bridge. You can dip your toe in the water before you jump in the pool, right? To know, is this really for me or not? Things like what you mentioned, the paperwork, right? Okay. Or if you've got an idea for a product or service, is there actually a market for this product or service before you say, do everything? I'm going to mortgage the house and we're gonna go do that. Test it out a little bit first. And if it fails, it's a low risk failure. You've learned a lot. You still have your day job. But if it works, now you're ready to go because like I think you had mentioned, you know, when you first became a solopreneur, it was an abrupt change and you're like, now what? Right. And then you spend that time scrambling to figure out how to get back on your feet. So I think whatever you're doing, trying that, try before you buy, if you want to make the change, because it's not always better and it may not always suit your personality.
That's actually because I did have a side hustle before I got hired, and
Okay.
it was super nice to run because all the sales that I got, I could put straight back into ads. I had like a e-commerce, so I could put everything that I earned put in the ads. So my ad budget was like €1,000 per month because I didn't rely on any of that money. So I could all the time make it grow, make it grow, make it grow. But then I quit it a little bit before I got fired. And then when I was thinking what I should do as an entrepreneur, I didn't have the courage to continue that side hustle. So I continued with marketing, which was like my expertise and professional expertise. And if I look back, maybe the side hustle would have been it would have been a different path, and maybe for sure, as at least as interesting as this one, but maybe even more. But now I'm getting closer to the side hustle with my it being more being the authenticity and everything. That was the what the side hustle was all about.
Mhm.
Like
Okay.
so, I definitely agree with that one. And I have to say that by the hours, like of course, into certain point, but it doesn't equal the more hours you work, the result is not better. So there are tasks that just take the certain amount of hours to get done. But especially when you're developing your service or wanting to improve, it's not the hours to count. It's how you work with those hours, how your brain is wired is what counts.
Mhm.
So I also think it's a good idea to have something else than work, no matter if you're employee or a solopreneur, but something that you can take your mind off from the work. And then when you work, you can really focus on it. So I think it's good advice.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note again, there's no right or wrong answer. There's just kind of what
No.
what works for you. But um, when you look at employment statistics, it's not heavily skewed towards employee versus entrepreneur. It's, depending on the country and how you look at it, it might be 60-40, 60% employee, 40% entrepreneurs. A huge percentage I know of in America are individual, are solopreneurs. And so, there's a lot of people that are successful on, in both areas. It's just you got to find the one that works for you. Hey, look, and if you try one and it doesn't work, you can always go try the other one. This is not a
Yeah,
permanent thing for
yeah.
anybody.
It's not like you get a tattoo on your forehead and then you can never never do anything else.
Yeah, exactly,
It's
exactly.
just going to give you a nice story afterwards.
That's it. That's it. Oh, fantastic. Well, hopefully this has been an interesting discussion. I know it has been for me. We've touched on a couple
Yeah,
of things
yeah.
that
For
you and
us,
I
it was.
hasn't haven't talked about before. Hopefully someone else gets it.
I
Awesome.
hope so too. All right. Hey, thanks once again, John. We will talk soon again, but I hope also that the people get something out of our small talk here.
Fantastic. All right. Always good to talk to you, Yako. Take care.
Likewise. Bye bye.
Bye bye.